Hello, everyone. Welcome to the greatest show on earth. So today's webinar is essentially themed around P.T. Barnum, obviously played by Hugh Jackman in The Greatest Showman. And P.T. Barnum was one of the first kind of showmen who promoted musicals, and he promoted circuses, and he also had a touring public museum in the 1800s. And why are we talking about P.T. Barnum and The Greatest Showman? Because actually, this is all about what sponsors and exhibitors really want from your next event as an event organizer. So essentially, what we've got to think about here is that sponsored exhibitors pay a lot of money. They are the customers from the organizers of conferences, trade shows, confexes, and we've got to keep those people happy. And the good news is we've got our show men and women on the webinar today. We've got Brandon and Amy. I'm going to get them to talk a little bit about what they do, but they are absolute experts at event marketing. So these are the sponsored exhibitors. These are the people you're going to want some insights from so that you can improve or just maintain the great experience you're giving to your sponsored exhibitors, the people who pay the bills. We also have a third panelist, David. He's currently on a plane. I've told him he can join late if he wants to, in the middle of the passport queue. The TSA do not mind. They're very friendly because I think he's in America. So he may or may not join. But anyway, I'm going to hand over to Amy. Amy, tell us about your role, where you're from, and yeah, how you're working with events.
Great. Thank you for having me. So I'm Amy Devlin. I'm the VP of Strategy at George B. Johnson. We're a global experience marketing agency. And I work with clients, a number of clients that are primarily large technology brands. And I work with them on their sponsorship engagement strategy. So my lens for today will be through some of our biggest clients, what they're looking for from organizations. And I think a lot of what I'll talk about too will apply to any size company, no matter where you're coming from. And I'm also based in sunny Seattle.
Welcome from sunny Seattle.
Thank
Thanks very
you.
much. And you've got some great AI examples as well of some of your clients who are doing some cool things. So yeah, interested to hear that. And next, we're handing over to Brandon. Brandon, tell us a bit about you, where you're from, and your interest in events.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Brandon Paski. I'm currently the event marketing manager at an organization called Open Sesame. We are a e-learning content platform, providing all of those modules that everyone's required to take and everyone that likes to take as well at their organization. So in the learning development space, been doing a B2B event marketing for just over 6 years, but I've been doing events for over 20 years in music and radio as well. So I am currently based just south of Oakland, California in San Leandro.
Thank you very much. And I'm Hugh. I am the SVP of marketing at Grip. I'm kind of with these guys. So I've been in B2B marketing for over 20 years now. I've exhibited and I've been sponsors at various shows. So I'm an event marketer through and through, and I really believe in the power of events, and that's why I'm at Grip. And Grip exhibits and sponsors at events as well. So I can chip in with a few insights myself, but they won't be as good as those guys. Those guys are next level showmen and women. Right. First question. I am going to stop that share and I'm going to ask you, Brandon. Let's just get it out there. What is the worst experience you had as a sponsor exhibitor at a show? Tell me all. I want to hear warts and all.
Yes, I mean, I hate to use the word worst, but I would have to say it is getting an email to schedule a meeting a month prior to the event to rebook for the next year. So this has happened at least 2 different conferences we've been a part of. Amazing conferences. We get very solid leads out of them. But I was a little jarred when it was, I haven't even got there yet. Not much less had enough time to measure my ROI from this event. And I already have to invest, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in 2025 when I haven't even completed 2024. So I'd love a little bit of leeway and like maybe a little bit more conversation with conferences and trade shows about what an ROI looks like to us as a sponsor from your event, and how we can manage that and maybe push some sponsorships back before we sign. I've even had events where I received the prospectus and then be like, okay, this sounds great. Like what's available at ExoMap? And they're like, it's 3/4 of the way sold out already, before they even finish the prospectus. So sometimes it's difficult to like, can I justify sponsoring this event if I know I'm not going to get a great space on the floor? Am I going to be seen? So yeah, I think my advice is really just, it's tough because you need a little bit of patience, and then patience doesn't pay the bills.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I've seen that a lot, and these kind of hard pressure sale tactics. And there's like a board at the back of the exhibition hall where all the salespeople are looking at it. Like, who can we rebook? Who can we rebook? And it's kind of fair enough if it's towards the end of the show and you've got a sense of how it's going. But really, it's, it depends on your sales cycle time, isn't it? So it could be 3 months until after the show. You've really got a sense that you've got some leads, and those leads have turned into some sales qualified opportunities, and those maybe have turned into some deals. Maybe not even then. As an enterprise company, it might be 18 months down the line till you know if it's worked or not.
Absolutely. I mean, events have a really long tail when it comes to closing business. So it's difficult to judge even prior to the event. Like based on historicals, I can look back to 2023 and see how the organization did at that event, and that doesn't really give me a whole guide into like what's going to happen in 2 years from that point. So,
and what about you, Amy? What sort of things have you seen not done as well as they could be at events when it comes to being a sponsor and exhibitor?
Yeah, I actually I love the topic of data. I think one way that one thing that would really help our clients is actually helping them deeply understand the audience at these events, how we can best engage these audiences in meaningful and relevant ways. I think, one thing that we're seeing is that we just need some of that additional information. I think often a prospectus has really limited information about who's there, right? There's just enough to get you sign up to sponsor, but not really enough to help you tailor your experience to engage the audience correctly. And a lot is left up to the sponsors and the agency partners, so us, to really fill those gaps. I was chatting with a colleague about this actually, and an organizer who we think does this well is South by Southwest. I think they share some really useful demographics around their audience, why they're there, give us industry slice, what's their purchasing power, where they're coming from. But I would push it even further, like what are their engagement preferences? What types of solutions are they searching for? Because we can better tailor what we're doing to be more successful, which means that our clients will come back and invest more. So I just really want organizers to get interested in their own audiences, like do the research, give us some additional insight that would really, really help. So that's one of the biggest things that we start to have in conversations about, do we go back? Did we do this correctly? That additional data would be really helpful.
Well, you get my first gold star of the day, Amy, by naming a GRIP client, South by Southwest. So well done, Brandon. You got to keep up with Amy now. So yes, I agree. Data seems to be a big thing. And there was a fantastic email out this week from Julius Solaris where he shared SaaSta's, which is the big SaaS ecosystem conference, SaaSta's slide deck that they send to the sponsor exhibitors to say, if you're a gold sponsor, if you're a platinum sponsor, if you're bronze, these are the number of leads you will get, and each year it's going up. So you need to really talk the language of these event marketers. So it's leads, it's how many connections did you have at the show if you were having meetings, how many people came to your sponsored session. And I should think all of this stuff, Amy, is kind of giving you the right data at the back end to argue to get more budget to spend with that show again.
It is. I think that I did see that come out. I think that level of insight and information is incredibly valuable. I think it really does depend though on the sponsor themselves, right? We have to kind of fight an uphill battle internally sometimes where if you're just showing up with your booth, if you're just trying to have, a one-off content session in a breakout like off the expo floor, we're not doing enough to really activate the audience. So I even want to see more examples about like what works, what doesn't. I think a great insight that we received kind of recently, because we send people to audit events to like really deeply understand the audience, to do intercepts. One thing we saw at RSAC, right? It's a cybersecurity event. We found some interesting insight about these audiences. A few years ago, a brand, won't name it, tried like a gamification tactic with these audiences and placed some QR codes around their booth with like no clear labels. Very little engagement. And really it's because those cybersecurity professionals are of course incredibly skeptical of scanning like random codes. That's just like that level of insight I think is also really helpful. So not only, hey, we see leads go up, but like what is it that those brands are doing that's making that engagement happen on a meaningful level? That is also incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I mean, that really comes back to brilliant example, because you think, oh, QR code's got to go everywhere, but cybersecurity is slightly different. Probably different if it's a, conference about how to help disabled people who are blind, maybe. I don't know. So yeah, I think that understanding your audience and working back from that really works. I mean, Brandon, you've probably got some examples of kind of testing to see if a conference or a trade show has your audience at it. I know what I've done in the past. I've said to my sales reps, I said, look, we're not going to spend loads of money to send you to a conference in year one. We've never had experience of this conference before. We are going to send you as a visitor, and you're just going to go and you're going to work the floor and you're going to meet some people. Then we're going to get a sense of whether it is an actual event that we could put money into in year two. That's the sort of stuff we've done to understand, to read the room, to understand the audience. Because I don't know about you, Brandon, but in my experience, a lot of organizers, quite rightly, want to be the PT Barnums of their own show, and they want to say, yeah, we've got all the audience here. And when you show up, they're not actually there. They're not, or they're just not the right people for your particular brand, even though some people might promise you it in a prospectus. And how do you go about making sure the right people are in the room?
Yeah, we absolutely will send a representative to be an event, to walk around, to talk to. We'll actually rely a lot on our partners and talk to them. Because we'll see if they're sponsoring the event, be like, hey, what is your, I'll talk to their event team and say, what was your experience here? What kind of leads what kind of data can you share without, going subverting GDPR or any privacy laws? Like, give me just a high overview of like, was this the right audience for you? Do you think this would be the right audience for us? We work really closely with a lot of our partners, and our partners put on a lot of user conferences. And the challenge for us there is kind of making sure that we are talking to the audience. Like, they have a very vast, attendee list, and we are probably targeting about 15 to 20% of that audience. So we need to make sure that like it's a solid 15 to 20% that we're going to target, and it's going to be worth our money. So yeah, we're talking to partners, talking to other event managers, just sort of seeing what's out there outside of the prospectus. There's great data in there, but there's, there's data everywhere, but not a drop to drink. We have just like, I think even the pandemic taught us during like digital events that like the data that you can gather at an event is just so helpful and just so instrumental in deciding yes or no, I can do this. And yes, I know that this is going to be a successful event.
Yeah, it's like one of my old bosses used to say, you got to sell success back into the business. And, when you do some good work, you got to tell the rest of the team you're doing. I think it's the same with organizers. You've got to demonstrate success to the people who pay you the money. And, I think there's some great tips in there for organizers, which is don't just market at people who think could be sponsoring exhibitors next year. Market at the people who are the visitors, because they could just be sussing out your show. So market to them to level up to become a kind of exhibitor or sponsor. And similarly, think about the partners. And ultimately, doesn't this all come back to your wife, Brandon? She's a hairstylist, and her biggest channel is word of mouth. And word of mouth is the best form of marketing to get new business. So if you've got a great show, it's going to result in people spreading the word, whether it's partners, whether it's in a Slack channel or wherever.
Absolutely. If I have an AE from an organization that's attending a conference, just like with their pro dev budget or whatnot, and they come back and they had a terrible experience, like I'm definitely going to think twice about sponsoring that event.
Yeah, so reputation is key, and just put on
Absolutely.
a great event, which is easier said than done. Excellent. Right, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about good activations and what we're looking from as sponsors, exhibitors, and how we want organizers to help us with those activations. Now, Amy, I know that you work with some mega budgets and some superb clients. Tell us a bit about some of the activations you've seen from brands like IBM.
Yeah, I would start even just with brands like IBM, brands that we work with like Cisco, they're looking for integration. It's one of the most important conversations we're having with clients and event organizers. I think the fastest way some of the brands we work with will turn down events is if it feels like the organizer is treating them like a commodity instead of offering a solution and information that really makes it feel integrated into the broader narrative of the event. So what we're seeing, and I'll get to the point about IBM, but really that off-the-shelf hierarchy of sponsorship packages, I think built around a physical booth space with like a predictable keynote and an expo, that's becoming less appealing. So we're working with a lot of brands who are, not just looking to get their brand name out, but are looking to get a message out or push against an actual perceived perception of what their brand can offer. So if there's a new product offering, or as of course the flavor of the day, they're really looking to kind of lean in and own the AI space in their specific niche. That's what they're trying to do, and sponsorship can really be a great vehicle to do that. So examples like South by Southwest, Web Summit, Collision Conference, those are all events where we can be really flexible with takeovers of like places, spaces, stages, and we can kind of create some of those higher value moments. I think the IBM Calling the Shots activation that was developed for the South by Southwest audience this past year, it's actually being roadshowed. It was brought to Dreamforce, so there's an initial investment, but the idea of actually getting hands-on with the AI, it's actually built using their AI solutions. It's a great example of like the ability to take over a space, the ability to tell an end-to-end narrative, create that journey, and then use the event as also like a content engine. So it's not just about connecting with just the people who are there. The people who are outside the event are equally as important. And so looking at opportunities like bringing that activation to South by has been an incredible content creation engine for the brand. But again, those are some of the conversations that we're looking at now. Integration, content creation engine, and like real flexibility to bring in some of these developments, these activations that they've created, and they want to see the investment out of it over the course of a year.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. There's so much we need to unpack, and I saw Brandon nodding away, so we're going to bat that one back and forward. First thing I'd like to say is don't treat me like a commodity. That's so
Yes.
important, and that's happened to me more times than not when I've been exhibiting at shows. Often because we've got a very small booth. I haven't worked as the SVP of marketing at Microsoft and have $500,000 to drop on a booth activation. But you never know. That person could end up getting more investment next year, and they could spend more money with you, or they could go to another job and get one of those jobs eventually. You never know, but it's going to leave a nasty taste in the mouth if you treat them like a commodity. So, kiss every single frog like it could be a prince. That's my first one. And the other one is IBM. Tell us a little bit about this activation, because it sounds really interesting. I'd just like you to tell us how it worked, what it was, and I just love the audience to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the idea originally was like, how do you have an AI conversation with a broad audience? I think there's when this conversation first started happening, there's a lot of feelings around AI, and I think one of the easiest ways to get people into the conversation is to actually lower the barrier to entry. And sports are a really great way to show the power of AI without it feeling scary. And so the original intent was to create this, whole kind of activation experience where it was called the IBM Sports Club. But the ability to kind of go in and have this, table tennis engagement where AI is actually working to read your score, to actually produce commentary based on what's actually happening so you can kind of get hands-on with it right there in the space. It was just a really great way to simplify the offering and just show the power of Watson. It continues to be a great experience because, again, it's that low barrier to entry. It's education, but wrapped in fun. And the other thing that IBM, I think, is doing really well is actually bringing in some influencers who can play against, try to beat AI, play against other people who are coming into the activation. So again, it just up levels the engagement once you can start thinking about how to use this as the centerpiece for the conversation. But I think it's been incredibly successful and, obviously a traveling piece that continues to add to their portfolio.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. And obviously that's huge budgets. I mean, Brandon, from your point of view, how have you seen sponsored exhibitors, doing content on their booth, or having these kind of side events that are kind of tangential to the standard calendar or the schedule of what's going on in the main arena?
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna echo a lot of what Amy said. Like, events are a content machine. You have a unique opportunity to be in front of your prospects, but also to be in front of your customers. And your customers, talk to your customers before the event. We do at Open Sesame, we do a lot of we go through a lot of intent data. We are using like platforms like 6sense, where we are trying to figure out who's thinking about going to these events and how they cross-reference with our prospects and our customers, and talking to our customers like, are you coming to the event? Are you coming to this event? Stop by our booth. We're at this booth. We've got something special for you. Working with people that we know are going to be there and scheduling video interviews at our booth, grabbing that content and then pushing that out. And that's evergreen content that we can use for months and months. Customer sessions, having our customers speak at the event, come back to our booth, talk to people. I've had customers do a full session and then come back to the booth for the next 2 days giving demos of the product. And that's huge. You don't have an AE with you. Like, this is somebody who uses it every day. This is how I use it. Let me show you how this works, which is absolutely huge. And then having the customer write a blog, using that, again, as evergreen content, case studies, on and on and on.
So how can organizers help you better with that? Because, in 2006, I was working as the kind of event marketer for a big conference. It sounds crazy. It's called IPO6. It was where we were talking about the future could be, films and TV over the internet. Imagine that. I know what you're thinking, Amy. I don't look old enough. It's true. Thank you. Very kind of you to say that. So this was pretty crazy. And what we did is we phoned every single exhibitor and we said, look, from a PR point of view, what can you announce at our show? Can you come up with a big announcement and do it at our show? And then can we put it into a content calendar and like announce it every day and then put these great, huge announcements out? And it was massive. It really, really worked, but it was a lot of work. 4 months out, we were calling these exhibitors and getting to think about us as a launch pad, which kind of turned us into a bit of an ecosystem event in a way. So Brandon, what do you think organizers can actually do to help sponsored exhibitors with this sort of stuff?
I think to Amy's point earlier, getting into that attendee data. We're currently sponsoring a event where they have asked all their attendees to do an opt-in pre-show email from sponsors. So that gives me the opportunity to sort of have an easy lift to reach out to the people that I know are already going to be at the show. And I can go through that list and I can see those organizations and say, like, are any of these my ICPs? Like, this is huge. This is amazing. Instead of like guessing and sending a mass email out to maybe somebody who's going to be at the show or maybe had searched about going to the show. So I think that, like, having an opt-in with your attendees and letting us know like who's going to be there. Really?
Yeah, I mean, you get my second gold star, Brandon. Thanks very much. Well done. Because obviously Grip, with the app, it's got the directory, and this could be any event app, but you could go into the directory and you can see who's going to be there, and you can start scheduling meetings. And I think this is one thing David wanted to pick up on. I don't know if you guys want to riff on it, which is the value of meetings at these shows. And we've all talked about ROI and did someone come by your booth? But really, what's the end result of this, which is, did you have a meeting with someone? And I see these kind of hosted buyer meetings coming up quite often, these facilitated meetings. Is there a world, either of you, where you want to see more meetings from events? And does that help you showcase ROI to kind of your clients or to the leadership team?
Yes, and I would say, speaking for David, I think he brought this up in the last call. Gartner used to do, I remember this too. They used to do a concierge that would help you actually connect with the right, and that was an incredibly valuable service that they offered, because it took a lot of the load. Because, like Brandon, you mentioned, trying to actually find the right people to meet with beforehand, depending on the event, can be incredible. Like, it's really time consuming. You have to have the right content, the right appeal to get them there. But I think that the idea of increased ROI around those like really critical meetings, I think is really important, because one of the conversations we're increasingly having with our clients is they want to go to these events to reach the C-suite, to reach that decision, like really valuable decision maker audience. And being able to do that in a way that is a one-to-one experience, not slapping their logo on a like networking breakfast with that audience, like that just does not work. But the value of actually being able to connect directly with those incredibly valuable audiences is something that our clients are increasingly demanding. And I think events that do that well too, like Mobile World Congress, one of our clients goes there and almost their entire space is meeting rooms. There's like a very small portion of the actual booth that is open to the public. And so again, it's event to event, but the more organizers can do to help make those connections with some of the brands that are sponsoring at your events, I think that the more ROI they will absolutely see out of it.
Would you agree with that, Brandon? Is it,
I would,
a meeting's big for you?
yes, meetings are huge for us. The more one-on-one meetings I have booked going into an event, like the happier my C-suite is going to be, especially my sales managers, and the happier I'm going to be at the event, because I know I've got, 5, 6, 15, 20 meetings before we even start like putting up laptops on the expo floor. So I'd love to see more of that. Oh man, I miss that Gartner concierge. That was so great. I'd love to see more like that. We're finding success in kind of smaller events, not necessarily trade shows or conferences, but almost you call them like a summit, where we are getting sort of that one-on-one matchmaking. We're saying like, here's our value prop, here's what we're looking for in organizations to work with. Here's a solution we're providing, and then in turn the event is providing, saying like, here are the people that are looking for what you're offering. Like, let's see if we can schedule something together. And, they give guaranteed meetings, etc. But just that little bit of data of like, hey, here's some attendees that are looking for this would be amazing.
So this brings us on to our next point, which is a message from our sponsor again, which is Grip. Hooray! Our next webinar is coming up 27th of November. Sign up for it. Use the QR code. It's actually about what we're talking about now, facilitated meetings, this kind of concierge service of bringing people together, matchmaking. There's a concept called hosted buyer, which a lot of people on this call are probably aware of. And that's what we're going to be talking about. And it's a friends theme. So this one was Greatest Show Men and Women. The next one is all about friends, because it's about bringing people together, a community together, and they all like to hang out at Central Perk. So you should join us at our virtual Central Perk, where we've got Greg Reeves, who is one of the dons when it comes to hosted by. He does Connections Luxury, and we've also got Jack Newey from Mash Media, who is running a hosted buyer event in November, and he did a big one last year as well. So these are the guys to really find out all about hosted buyer and how facilitated meetings work. Is what we're talking about. Fantastic. Okay, that's enough about me rambling. We also have some questions from our audience. Great. So I thought we could go through some of these and talk about some of them. So we talked about ROI. Is there anything else that anybody wants to talk about ROI? So what I'm getting from here is what sponsored exhibitors want to see are how many meetings did you get booked? How many leads came out of that? You know, which ones turn into sales qualified leads, which ones turn into opportunities, which ones turn into deals. Is there anything else, Brandon, you want to find from the organizer when it comes to reporting? Or is there any anecdotal stuff like, you know, brand awareness or, you know, deals with partners, things like that? What are some of the things you're looking for from organizers to tell you that it worked?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see a recap from the event organizers saying, hey, here's the data that we've gathered from our surveys. Here's what we got. Here's you know, even our quantitative data and our qualitative data, any sort of social listening, like just to see, you know, what the overall attitude and the takeaways were from the event. Was the theme resonating? Were we able to, like, you know, embed ourselves into that theme? I think, you know, outside of the, you know, the equation of lead to marketing qualified lead to sales accepted lead is to close a business is definitely our ROI. And we could definitely keep that in mind. But I think there is, like, I would love to see some sort of brand awareness. Is there something in a survey where organizers can put in some sponsors? Like, was there any sponsors that stood out to you? So we can see, okay, yeah, I do remember that booth. That booth did a great job. Like, maybe there's something that I can do that's similar, or I can do something that has, like, I saw something that's a great idea and I want to do that as well. So I'd love to see something like that.
Love those.
I
Yeah.
will plus
Talk to your
one
audience. Oh, yes,
everything
Amy.
you just said. Yes, plus one to everything you just said. I love the idea of, was the theme resonating? What were the topics that were kind of most discussed? And I even want to see that broken down more. I think I've seen a lot of prospectus or post-event reports that are like, AI was the hot topic. You're like, well, I know that. What about it? Like, get more specific. And then, was our brand, that, you know, our sponsor brand, able to integrate into that conversation in a meaningful way? So, like, even a little bit more custom, a little bit more tailored. So I love that plus one, everything you just said.
Yeah, even like what sessions were most attended.
Yes. Yeah.
So we can see what the themes are in the industry or the event, and
Yeah.
can we tailor our story for something similar next year?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Again, it comes back to data, doesn't it, really? Sarah Whitaker-Smith, who's been on a previous webinar from AgriConnect, she talks about understanding what, you know, the content streams are really working by surveying the audience to see, what did you think about that? It was a bit too general. We want to delve down a little bit. And then you could jump on a call with some of these people and actually say, well, why didn't that work? And she's constantly thinking about the new content streams that can unlock new growth. So I think for everything you guys are talking about, all of this data, if you think about it, it could be reused for marketing purposes for next year's event. So as organizers, talk to the types of people like Brandon and Amy's clients, because they can give you some pearls of wisdom that could really accelerate your marketing for 2025, I reckon. Cool. Okay, let's talk about side events. That's quite interesting. That came up on our prep call, didn't it? So I was at a show recently, and the busiest booth I found was AWS, and they had a big presentation screen, and someone was delivering some content to everyone sitting around listening to it. Obviously, AWS, everyone's going to want to hear what they're doing. I mean, their revenue is going to be, I think, 98 billion this year. So big company, everyone's interested. A lot of people are customers. But I've seen some bad kind of content activations done on booths. I saw someone just after the pandemic do a podcast, and you think, oh, that's quite cool. And everyone's like, oh, that's novel. But for me, it didn't really work, because I was like, well, I feel like I can't come up and talk to anyone in the booth. I feel like it's one way, but not directed at me. It's at other people who aren't even at the show. And I was like, oh, I get you're trying to capture content, but there are other ways to do it. So what have you guys seen with side events and how can you leverage those things? So Amy, you talked about IBM obviously, but what have you seen like when it comes to content and interesting things, and how has organizers been able to help you leverage that more? Because I think that's what we're seeing a lot at the moment. Organizers
Yeah.
saying people want to put these side events on, but we can't really help them because we don't know what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a big conversation that we're having right now because of the rising costs of sponsorships. Budgets at companies are being cut. So a lot of brands are looking to invest in like what we've heard over and over again, fewer but more impactful. And I think within these events, we talked about like reaching that hard to reach audience, that decision maker, that C-suite audience that again, they have their own programming going on at the event, and it really comes at a premium to try to like actually wedge in as a sponsor, or you're not allowed. And I think more organizers, again, I think really deliver that opportunity to reach those audiences. But we're seeing a lot of brands are actually vying for those premium opportunities and then not getting them. So there's more satellite engagements growing in popularity and request. And I think some brands are maybe even going in at a smaller level because they're being forced into packages that they don't want. Maybe it's out of their budget range. So we're seeing a lot of organizers with some of the clients that we're working with, not actually helping us with satellite opportunities, but us just doing it on our own, finding those places and spaces, maybe around the convention center, as ways to take over, engage these hard to reach audiences, and host something that might be a little bit, different and unique. I think some of the best examples that we've seen have happened at South by Southwest. Again, I just think that there's some really, because there's so much competition for satellite experiences, that brands are just continuing to up their game and find unique ways to actually bring audiences in, to engage them in something really interesting, and to offer them a real value exchange beyond like, we're going to host a dinner or here's a happy hour. So I think the most successful brands that we're seeing are at some of these events where there's a lot of competition and they're able to just kind of up the ante with how they're engaging those audiences.
Yeah, it's certainly something we've seen at Grip, which is we've just launched a side event, satellite event management tool, because there are all these brands doing separate things, but the organizers want a bit of control. So it allows the exhibitors and sponsors to upload their side events to a platform, to our platform, and then that becomes part of the main agenda if it's accepted and curated by the organizer themselves. So I think, yeah, you're right. This is what we're seeing, and I've not thought of that before. So good point, Amy, which is budgets are being squeezed. People want to do more with events. So they're like, well, let's pick the best events and just put more into it. Create bespoke content just for this event. When we haven't got a keynote speaking slot, doesn't matter. We're going to do it on our booth. So yeah, really, really, really great. I love that. Right. Let's talk about some of the other questions we've had from our audience, our lovely audience. So this is interesting, Brandon. This is from Sarah. Can you touch on the increasing trend not to include any valuable contact info in lists and badge scans? So this is like when you go into the event app, it actually hasn't got the person's job title or company, for example. It just has their name, which I think is a bit of a missed opportunity for organizers. Have you been seeing this trend, or is this something you want to see less of or more of?
I guess it's not something I've seen, to be totally honest. I've actually almost seen the opposite in using badge scan devices that we can curate our qualifying questions and add as much data as we possibly can. But I think Sarah is speaking to like personal identifying information, right? Like email address, yeah, I will say that I have seen a trend to step away from the requiring a business email specifically for like digital events and for webinars. I have seen a sort of a step away from that and accepting like the Gmails and the Yahoos, which makes it, I think it kind of makes the follow-up job for sales development or business development, it's a little bit more difficult because you're not really sure exactly what organization this person is coming from. It's a little of anonymity. So yeah, outside of that, I really haven't seen, to be honest, I haven't seen a trend in that way. I think there's almost a demand for more data about who we're talking to.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, there are some organizers that might do this, and actually it's detrimental, I think, to their business. Actually, there will be times where people want to opt out of marketing information, and that's fine. But what we find at Grip as a sponsor and exhibitor, making sure your profile in the event app is absolutely spot on, with pictures for all your salespeople at the event, with the names, with the contact information. So many sponsors and exhibitors just don't do it. They don't. They get to the event, they're like, oh yeah, I've got all this other stuff to do, and I get it, it's busy. But if you just think a couple of weeks out and just put the effort in, it pays dividends in the long run. Next question. I really love this one. So obviously, Amy, a lot of your clients have massive budgets, but you guys are creative geniuses, so you can think of cool ways to do activations as a sponsor and exhibitor on the cheap. So how do you stand out on a smaller budget? So if you're exhibitor at a show, what should you do? What little tricks could you implement to stand out? And I suppose, what could organizers learn from that? Because they often do webinars, don't they, to their exhibitors to say, okay, before the show starts, this is what you want to be doing, get your profile done, do all this. And so this could maybe form part of that webinar. So what are the things do you think exhibitor sponsors should be doing to stand out a bit more if they haven't got loads of cash?
Yeah, I think I love this question. I feel like we could have a whole separate hour-long conversation just on this. I go back to, this is a strategist answering. So a creative person would probably answer different, but I would say it's all about going back to your position. What makes you unique? What's the value that you can offer this audience? So like really go back to thinking about integration and then start to narrow your target. Who do you need to reach? Get really specific and then really work with the organizer to find what opportunities are available to get really targeted and be really realistic with your goals. I think often bigger booths don't equal better. It just doesn't. I think the more you can focus, the better the better chance you're going to have. On the flip side of that, like from a tactic standpoint, one of the things that we're doing a lot now is just really thinking about activating the audience. So just showing up and having, your salesperson there to try to bring people in, try to think about interesting ways to stand out. I've seen super simple tactics like at RSAC, I keep going back to this example, but one brand had like just a lock picking activation. They gamified it. It was really low tech, but you're tapping into exactly what those audiences want. They want a little bit of a game. They want to break something. They want to do something a little bit nerdy. And what did that cost? It didn't cost a lot, but it was the ability to, like, again, think about how to attract that audience, get really specific, and just really understand like what makes them tick. Because I think you can come up with a lot of creative solutions that don't necessarily have to break the bank.
Love it. I'm going to start my lock picking this weekend. Brandon, tell me a bit about you. What do you think are some of the cool, creative, cheap executions you could do?
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely back up Amy on, knowing your audience, knowing what your value proposition is, what does your solution provide, and what kind of themes can you take in with the event that you're exhibiting at, and how can you change that? So like, for example, we were at an event where the theme was engage and charge and recharge. So we were thinking like, what could we do easily? We could just have Post-its out and say like, what recharges you? And just like write it down on a Post-it and slap it on a wall. And then that's just a really easy, really cheap, really easy physical act that like you're still having somebody engaged, and it's an automatic conversation starter too. When you have that question right there, people are like, oh, here's what engages me, or here's what recharges me. And then you can talk a little bit more about your product while they're there, and learn about what they're looking for and what their needs are.
I think that's great. And both of you seem to be saying the same thing, which is, if you're an organizer and you're going to be running some sessions to teach your sponsored exhibitors how to be better and get the most value out of the show, it seems like giving them a couple of slides on who's going to be at the show, the audience, really break down what they care about. And then you could maybe delve into the survey that did last year to say, this is what they really loved last year. This is what they didn't like. These are the activations that really did work. These are the sessions that are really great. These are some of the trends that are hot right now with the audience because we spoke to them a couple of weeks ago. So all of that stuff is understanding the customer and then working backwards from that.
I would also love to add, I would love to see, as an exhibitor, as a sponsor, I would love to see the results of that survey that I took for the event to see what are the other exhibitors, what are the other sponsors saying as well.
Love it, love it, love it. Thank you very much, guys. I'm just going to flick through to this slide, which is our next webinar. So yeah, please scan. While I'm promoting the hell out of that one, we've come to the end, unfortunately, but I'd love to thank our amazing panelists. Brandon, tell us a bit about where people can find you, maybe connect with you and start another conversation about how they can learn more from exhibitors like yourself.
Absolutely. I am on LinkedIn, just to search for Brandon Paski. Technically it's a made up last name, so there's not a lot out there. BrandonPaski@gmail.com. If you want to reach out via email, I'd love to connect and talk more.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining. And Amy, how can people find out about you and George P. Johnson?
Yeah, please reach out, LinkedIn, same. If you search Amy Devlin, there's a lot of us. I don't look like this in my profile picture, so you will see a brunette with a yellow background. That is me. And you can also always please reach out direct on our website if you have any questions. Scott Kellner is our head of marketing, and he can always help field your requests. But please find me on LinkedIn if you want to connect.
Lovely. And thank you very much, both of you, for a brilliant, almost P.T. Barnum-esque, amazing webinar. We've learned a lot of stuff, and I think a lot of organizers can really delve into what's going on behind the scenes with their sponsored exhibitors to generate more revenue, to generate more word of mouth about how amazing these shows are and how the kind of lifeblood of those shows are the people who are paying the money who are sponsoring and exhibiting at these things. So lovely to see you, and we will see you on the next one, all about hosted by and pre-scheduled meetings. Thanks, guys. See you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you.